Ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you. Psalms 107 says, "Oh, give thanks unto the Lord, for he is good, for his mercy endures forever. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, whom he has redeemed from the hand of the enemy, and gathered them out of that land. But they wandered in the wilderness in a solitary way. They found no city to dwell in. Hungry and thirsty, their soul fainted within them. And they cried unto the Lord in their trouble, and he delivered them out of their distresses. He led them by the right way, that they may go to a city of habitation. Oh, that man would praise the Lord for his goodness, for his wonderful works to the children of man." See, just being freed or liberated is not the end of the story. The children of Israel were living in bondage and slavery to the Egyptians for 400 years. And they finally were freed of their bondage, and they got out and escaped the land of Egypt through the Lord God. But they had nowhere to go. They ended up in the wilderness for 40 years. And sometimes they suffered and sometimes they didn't. But what is amazing is, in the end, they got their own place, their own heritage, which was promised to them through their forefather Abraham. The Lord promised the land that Abraham dwelled in, which they left and went into Egypt, and they were returning to. Now, why I say this is because a lot of us always believe that, for those who claim to be Christians, "Oh, Lord, deliver me from this situation." You're delivered from the situation, or you ask the Lord, "Lord, give me this," and you get what you want. But you don't understand the story doesn't end there. In fact, usually there are more problems that you have to face than less. And so let us bear in mind that when we get out of a situation or we're delivered from it, that we may still end up, until we land into a place of habitation, a place where we can dwell and abide in, which in this case would be love. When we get to that mind state, but on that journey to that mind state, we're going to have a lot of difficulties. We'll have to let go of a lot of things and embrace a lot of things we don't want to embrace. So let's remember that as we go forward through this day. I hope you guys have a great one. Here's this similarity I noticed between the fighting styles of the characters on Krypton and the fighting styles of the characters on Man of Steel who were on Krypton. I'm talking particularly of two specific characters. General Zod, when he faced Lyta Zod in the television series Krypton, and also General Zod when he faced Jor-El in the movie Man of Steel. And you can see visually there are a lot of similarities, not only in terms of the fighting style, but also in terms of the architecture that surround both properties. And I'm talking about identical situations where General Zod slams Lyta Zod into a wall, and you can see look at these walls. They're serrated walls. It's not cool to get slammed into a wall like that. And the fighting style is very rough and crude and harsh and gritty. And it shows the valor and the courage of these soldiers, that in war, soldiers fight anyhow, tooth and nail. Even though they're skilled fighters, they fight tooth and nail. And we know Lyta Zod is a very tough character. And we know General Zod is a very tough character. And they actually enjoy fighting hand-to-hand combat. And we see that both Lyta and General Zod, almost identically, are slammed into walls. And then they are slammed to the ground right after. And I thought it was very interesting. And there are a lot of other things they do, kicks and cuffs and just certain things which are very characteristic to Kryptonians that we see move across from the choreography, that is, move across from, Man of Steel, and they took it and they put it into the Krypton series. Of course, it's not as refined, and the camera angles are not as great, and cinematography is not as fantastic as we saw in Man of Steel, but yet we see the same sort of architecture. We see the circular archways. We see the overhanging things, the lighting. It tells us all that this is kind of very similar to what we saw in Man of Steel. I don't know if they're similar people or if it's just David Goyer's writing of the story where we get the similar sort of appearances and looks. We know that Krypton is not a prequel to Man of Steel. It is a prequel to Superman, not Man of Steel, and you can tell because, first of all, General Zod is black in this version of Krypton, whereas he was white in Man of Steel. But seeing that Lyta Zod is his mother, and I don't know if he knew his mother for a very long period of time, but he probably read about her because he didn't easily identify her when he saw her. So it was only when he saw the glyph on her pendant that he realized, oh, I am your son. And he obviously had traveled back in time to do what he's doing. But the interesting thing about this, because we have time travel and all these things, we don't know if the future, how the future will change for Krypton. We don't even know if Krypton will go longer than 200 years or what will happen. Actually, since Sagel said to Kal-El that this was 200 years before, I have to assume that either Krypton is destroyed or that something happened so that Superman could end up going to Earth. So I'm not quite sure what happens with Krypton in this particular television series, which is very interesting. And so there's some departures from what you know in Man of Steel, but yet there's just so many similarities in how these characters behave, and even the music that's playing is somewhat similar to the music that we heard in Man of Steel when the Zods are fighting one another, and when Zod comes to Earth, you know, the boom, 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 well, you don't get exactly that. You get more of a kind of that kind of thing going on in Krypton. But I just find it very interesting that they kind of clash, and it's very savage. You listen to the Kryptonian music in Krypton, and it's savage. I mean, when Lyta Zod broke the commander's neck, when they were fighting hand to hand, Lyta Zod was slammed into a rock and stuff. I mean, brutal. I mean, when you look at the Kryptonian battles and even the Kryptonian soldiers and how they fight and everything, damn, Vala. I mean, just thinking of the story, the House of Zod, when we heard how Dinah Zod, how she killed her own cousin or brother or whatever he was, killed him. I mean, left him for dead. You know what I'm saying? The Zods take no prisoners, man. They got no mercy. When they're fighting, they don't fight with mercy. And man, the Zods, they're you know, I'm getting respect for the Zods, you know, and I see their culture and their way of life and how they hold certain things like honor above family and friends and all of that shit. They hold that above. I mean, it's just crazy, man, what the Zods are about. And so it's nice to see the history of the Zods and stuff. I mean, it is a television series. I wish it was a little bit more refined. I can go into more of my critiques about the television series as a television series. Sometimes they do a lot of telegraphing. That is to say, the characters will actually talk out a lot of the scenes, not leave you to interpret the scene. They kind of speak out almost everything, and it's kind of annoying to me sometimes. But other than that, you know, Krypton is a pretty cool television series. It's got a lot of intrigue and twist to it. I'm enjoying it for the most part. I just wish they would allow it to be a little bit more less telegraphed, you know, less obvious what's happening. You know, like when Segel is being tortured. Well, he's not being tortured, but and they kind of put in a humorous moment, which is okay. But I find him having to say everything that's happening sometimes annoys me. You know, we can see it with our eyes. You don't need to tell us what it is that's going on. So, I mean, that's the only thing with me. You know, that's one of the things I don't like about Marvel movies, how they kind of talk out every single thing. I don't like that at all. But, you know, Black Panther was a little bit different, even though they still talked out mostly everything. And you don't have to verbalize everything, folks. It's called a visual medium. So some of the things you can just watch. It's okay to be subtle, you know. So, that's all I got to say about that. And I wanted to say to you guys once again that deliverance does not mean the end of the story and we live all happily ever after. No, deliverance may be to get you to the next level. And sometimes God allows us to go through very difficult situations without deliverance because we have to step up to the next level and we have to be prepared for that. So just think about those things as we move on. And for those of you who are not Christian, you don't believe in God, don't worry. Another way of paraphrasing this is every situation that happens in life prepares you for another situation. This is the simple understanding of it. And I feel like a lot of times, sometimes when you get bailed out of a situation, sometimes you don't mature and you don't build enough character as if you were to go all the way through it. And sometimes you're not strong enough to handle it, so that's okay. And your head's in the right place. But at the same time, it's better sometimes to go through the rougher situations, because the life lessons that you learn will help you to be stronger in character as to where you want to go. Okay? And hopefully your character that you're trying to develop and you're trying to be strong in is something that is ethical, that is moral, that is something that other people can admire, that will help to build other people up. Because there's the other end of the spectrum where people are hardened in their hearts and their character is built on negative things and on immoral things and on unethical things. Okay? But there's always something to admire in each individual, no matter how terrible they are, and attributes that you can hold fast to. You guys have a great one.